Welcome to the Liberty Beacon Rant, and I am your host, Roger Landry, and of course this is sponsored by the Liberty Beacon Project, and joining me as she does every week, she is my pillar, what I lean on, and that would be Paula Mathers. How are you tonight, Paula?
I'm doing great. How are you, Roger?
I'm actually doing great. We've come to the end of our first series of podcasts. We've been talking about a republic. We've been talking about what isn't a republic. We've been talking about responsibilities. We've been talking about recriminations. But it's all centered around the basic theme that we have lost control of this country. And who have we lost it to? We've lost it to what we would term the elitist. And it's something that we the people have to take some responsibility for. And we've gone over all of that, so we're going to synopsize a lot of that today. And starting next week, we're going to shift gears just a little bit, because tyranny in this country does not always come in politics. Sometimes it comes in social promise. Sometimes it comes in it comes in many guises. But what we're going to shift to for a couple of weeks, and that will be our next series, will be the power and influence of mega corporations over this government. To name two industries would be the GMO industry, headed by, of course, Monsanto, and Big Pharma, with probably the lead dog there being Merck. So there is a lot happening there. There is a lot coming to light that's not being discussed as widely as it could be. But the Liberty Beacon Project has actually been cited by several large websites as being one of the pioneers in discussing these issues openly, as well as sharing peer-reviewed data to tell you its reality. So anyway, as you can see, we've got today to stop beating this topic to death and start beating another one up, Paula.
Let's kick some butt.
Well, we're going to go over the points today that have pissed me off so much in the past. And that would probably be the peak of each one of the shows that have been involved over the last series. But an essay I wrote that most encompasses my frustrations and my thoughts is the one we'll use for today's show. And the title for today's show, which is Liberty Can't Exist in Shades of Gray. Now, before we go any further, let's explain, all right? If a picture is in black and white, and let's go back to the original film, black and white, you had stark reality. If a picture is in shades of gray, you can mask almost anything in a picture. Shades of gray are infinite. Liberty can't exist in shades of gray. It's either a black or a white concept. It either exists or it doesn't. If you make excuses for it on any level, you negate it on every level. Stop and think about it. Liberty is okay for you unless you do this, then it's not. So what you've just done is negate that person's liberty. Because you've set standards, you've set licenses, you've set whatever you are as the governing facility. But anyway, some of the topics we need to discuss today are, again, fear is the biggest, and I've gone over this over and over again. And this is probably the point I rant against the most, and maybe not the most passionately, but the most often. Because fear has been a control mechanism over the mind of man for as long as man could conceive of controlling another man's mind. And it all started, and we're going way back, folks, when population centers started to build. And those at the hierarchy realized it would get harder and harder and harder to control the masses. It would. So, as a matter of fact, we have one famed diplomat who states quite blatantly, I think the last quote was at a CFR meeting, that it is infinitely easier today to kill 1 million people, whereas 20 years ago, it was infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than it was to control them. So what we have here is people in a hierarchy have always sought to maintain control. Well, how do you do it as the population center grows? Can you feed an army big enough to control everybody in your population all the time? No, you can't. So you build in a structure, and that structure is, if you sin, you burn in hell forever. And everything revolves around the premise of fear. And as I've said before, for anybody who's going to jump up and say, well, you're just an atheist, I'm not. But I don't believe in organized religion. Because I believe organized religion is where all of this started. Where all of this got perfected. And this goes back to the pagans and well beyond the Egyptians and the Christians. But it is not the concept of religion that was used to control the minds of these masses. In the earliest congregations, social congregations on this planet, it is the fear mechanism. If you don't do this, you will burn in hell forever. Stop and think about that. Who the hell wants to go through eternity feeling flames licking across your body? That's just insane. So it sets up an instant barrier of fear against what? Against what these mere mortals decided would be the infractions or whatever. And in fact, defined the punishment. We take this all the way up to modern day. Okay? And what we see is a big pushback. Against who? Against a region or a population on this planet that is almost 30% of the world's population. And that's the Muslim population. And we see a huge pushback against them. Why? Because we have been conditioned as an American society to fear Muslims and to fear, literally to fear, Islam. This is reinforced continuously. And it is a control mechanism. It is the mechanism by which right after right that we are supposed to enjoy, not because they are bequeathed to us, not because they are given to us or granted to us by any government or any leader, by vote or decree. They are unalienable. Well, I can tell you, when I was a kid, the word terrorist was something I might have come across once in a dictionary. I had no idea what it meant. I didn't put a definition to it until I was much older. What I did understand from that experience is that terrorism was not a world issue. Okay. But now we've gone to a nation where the mere mention of the word terrorism strikes fear into the hearts and minds of just about a vast majority of America. Why? What has transformed this country from a self-assured, strong-willed, and confident nation into a nation who sees terrorists behind every rock and in the eyes of Muslims regardless of their education or their caste in life? This from a nation who, a generation ago, spilled out into the streets by the millions to protest unjust warfare. But yet, we look around today, and in the same halls and in the same parkways and on the same avenues, where massive peace rallies were held. We see nothing. But yet we're involved in 5 to 6 times the conflicts across the face of this planet. We have a society who is conditioned to live within a comfort zone anymore. We've also discussed this. And in this comfort zone, they don't have to put up with all of the bad things that go on outside. This breeds complacency. Complacency breeds apathy. And from that, our definition of patriotism becomes, I went and voted today. Yeah, I got off work a couple of hours early. Ain't it great? You spent the rest of the afternoon at the pub. This is the extent of a vast majority of America. This is their foray into politics, once every 2, once every 4 years. We've also discussed that as a republic, we are the true governing force, or we were supposed to be, before we allowed that to be taken away. And again, I'm really looking forward to our show on the 14th Amendment. Some of the things that I have said, we're going to go into much deeper. Because I have said on several occasions, you are no longer a citizen of the original United States of America. And in fact, you are not. And we will prove that. But fear has been the control mechanism all along. And through that fear, and through a tyrannical Congress, because now we're going from our responsibility to their responsibility, we have seen one right after another usurped. And it hasn't usually been in big gobbles until recently. It was usually a peck here, a peck there, a peck here. Well, it's like that wall of tyranny, okay? I told you if you remove enough of the foundation bricks, that wall must crumble and fall. Well, there's a wall of liberty. And it's being pecked at in the same fashion. But the question here is, fear is by far the shiniest tool in the toolbox that's being used against us. And we've gone over that again and again. Our mainstream media is not only complicit, but in a lot of cases exacerbates, or is a fully interacting partner in this system. Well, in almost tolerable bites, you peck away at freedom until freedom means something different every day. More and more limits get set on us. These are the shades of gray. Right now we're told we have the freedom of speech, but at the same time there are several laws and bills that have been passed, or the freedom of assembly, that take those rights away. You can't openly protest on a government-owned facility. You can't protest anyone with Secret Service accompaniment. You can't protest. We've gone over a list of all of these. So your rights and freedoms have been given up in pecks. And where we sit today is a society controlled by fear. If you allow us to do this, we can protect you better. And of course, since 24/7, we're being conditioned through a mechanism of fear, which I hope we've established is by far the best control mechanism ever devised. So for 24/7, this is what we're taking in. Well, let's take this back and refocus it on another of the shows we did. This all came into play about 9/11. Now, I will tell you in another show that a lot of this started well before 9/11. It started 3-4 years prior to that. 9/11 was simply a mechanism to get the a switch to get the entire mechanism in gear. But the realization that 19 Muslims with box cutters thwarted the combined security of multiple nations, including the world's only remaining superpower. Yeah. This is very easy to believe, especially since several of them were supposedly under CIA surveillance for years prior to this. A majority of Americans, and this was represented in a study not too long ago, do not believe what the government is handing us or the 9/11 Commission report. As a matter of fact, the study showed that if we were to put things on a proper footing at this point in this country, due to that huge swap in basically allegiance or loyalties to an idea, the people who believe that the government is not telling the truth are now a vast majority. And those now defined as the conspiracy theorists are those, in fact, who believe in the government. Google this. Again, I never say anything I won't back up. There was actually a study showing that that's the mindset. So it started way back then at 9/11. And what it did was it triggered a cascade of events, starting with the Patriot Act and progressing all the way up through NDAA, all the way up through the president giving himself, through executive order, the right to assassinate American citizens. All of this they have accomplished through fear and the lack of involvement of the true governing force in this nation, we the people. And we've gone over that and we've beat it to death. You know what, Paula? I have yet to start ranting.
I was thinking, you work today. You're tired, aren't you?
Oh, no, I'm not tired. But I've probably burned everybody out on just about every one of these topics. And this is, in fact, a show of summary. And we'll go over a few original points, but it's to summarize what we've actually done. And it's the original shows when I'm getting my original point of view out on something. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, we cannot defend freedom abroad by deserting it at home. Edward R. Murrow. Let's just dissect that, okay? We cannot defend freedom abroad by deserting it at home. One of the biggest issues we talk about is the loss of our freedoms. We're not getting anywhere in the Middle East. Everywhere we're at, they still have a terrorist issue. We touched on that. Y'all know how I feel. The quickest way to put an end to the increasing number of violent terrorists is to stop frickin' killing their kids and their families. When our own government states, statistically speaking, that well over 90% of the deaths, which fastly approach 3 million, are what they term as collateral damage. Because it sounds a whole lot better than innocent people we killed.
Sick of it. Sick of it. Oh, Jesus.
But it's the truth. It is.
It's barbaric. It's prehistoric. Evolve already. We gotta stop this shit.
Well,
Collateral damage. These are children and families. They have nothing to do with any of this crap.
if you take, again, the government's own statistics, they would say, even in their drone attacks, which are supposedly precision attacks, that an accurate count would be close to 2 to 5% of the people actually killed are targets of interest, which means 95 to 98% are collateral damage. Okay. It is because of this that we have given up our rights. There is no nation on the face of this planet that exists today that has the military might or the political and just suicidal thought to invade or attempt to invade the United States, if for no other reason than by fear of massive nuclear retaliation. So to feel that we needed to give up all of our rights to be protected from countries that can barely feed their own, and a lot of them still ride horses into battle, Edward R. Murrow, very prophetic. We cannot defend freedom abroad by deserting it at home. It's exactly what's happening. And what is the mechanism for everything we've talked about? What's the elite's main mechanism? What's the government's main mechanism? What is, just about any huge corporation's main mechanism? It is the proliferation, I always have trouble with that, Paul, of fear. Everything we've discussed for the last 6 shows is based on us as a society being manipulated through fear. And the thing of it is, in this country, we have such modern marvels. We have big screen TVs. We have little handhelds you can walk around and watch your TV on. We have Hulu and we have MSNBC and everybody transmitting through the internet. So basically, you don't even need a TV anymore. And this fear and this control mechanism is being perpetuated constantly and very subtly. It's the picture behind the picture. But if you see that picture enough, even if it's a whisper, eventually it's going to burn a hole in your brain. True fact. I haven't watched TV in over 2 years. Okay, I apologize. I told you if I ever made a mistake, I'd live up to it. I have watched TV. I've watched at least 5 football games. And that's it. Live football games, by the way. Paula, that's it. I do not watch TV.
I know the feeling.
Being unplugged from that has
it's liberating.
It opens your mind to so many different concepts. Things that you literally don't have time to think about when you're plugged into the MSM simply because you are so plugged in. You even get addicted to the types of commercials they feed you. You find yourself humming the theme song of the commercial or the music of the commercial. Oh yeah. All of us do. I did.
Oh yeah, special needs children, that's some of the first things that they do. That's how powerful that stuff is.
And I believe
they
it.
hear it over and over and over again, it's drummed into you.
And like I said, a message, I don't care how softly it's spoken, if it's spoken enough, becomes ingrained. So, we have us. We've talked about the evil that's being committed. Last week we talked about a government that's doing everything but basically what the Constitution says they have the authority to do. If we go back to the beginning, we realize a federal government whose sole purpose was to protect and hold together the United States of America. They had no power over our schools. They had no power over our roads. They had no power. The amount of intrusion into the federal states, or the amount of intrusion into the individual's life, was almost non-existent. But today, everything is. Your phone calls, your cable box, your computer, I don't care where you are, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, just about any big internet media. Somebody is looking at you somewhere. So where's your right to reasonable privacy? Seems to me that's pretty much gone. You can put a drone 10,000 feet over my house that can see down to a gnat's ass in resolution. Probably tell you exactly what brand of jockey shorts I'm wearing today. Rights, freedoms. One of the biggest situations that the comfort bubble I was telling you about, one of the biggest, well, why I call it a bubble, is because people live so comfortably within them. They have all of the latest toys. They have their cable with 150 channels. They have their DVDs, they have their computers, they have the internet, they have their cell phones. And they are content to live within that world as long as they can live within that comfort bubble. If you take them outside of that comfort bubble, this is when they start to push back. And they push back hard. These are the people who are addicted to the MSM. This is where all of the basic conditioning comes through. Now, as I said, anybody could have debunked easily, had they done any thinking at all, had we not all been, warped into a patriotic froth after 9/11. And a lot of us were. I've only been awake for a little over 2.5 years, my friends. That's it. So imagine all the catching up I've had to do. And imagine as I speak to you on as much as I do and as deep as I do, and I speak with conviction because I know what I say, how much frickin' studying I've had to do. But at some point in our lives, we were all part of that bubble. That bubble is what divorces us from the political system. Because nothing in there is comfortable. Over 70, I could be wrong, it's somewhere between 68 and 70% of the population of this country today has stated in a recent poll that, hey, they're not satisfied with the government, they don't trust the government. Congress has an approval rating that's, I believe, still sub 15%. And the president just got an approval rating of 47%, but some are saying that that poll is tainted. It's actually about 32%. When we divorce ourselves from the political system, which we have, out of fear, in vast numbers in this country, then, and again, we've gone over this, it is within the nature of any government to consolidate and centralize power around itself. And the more apathy is shown, the more consolidation becomes a reality. We've discussed this, and this is an important part, so we'll hit on this again. 90% of these assholes go back to Congress. And that's an average. I think in the House of Representatives it was like 96%. But yet, all of us, we've been railing against all of this for the last 3 years that I'm aware of, when I started to wake up. But we sent these same people back to Congress. And we go back through the MSM cycle and the brainwashed puppies who feel they've done their patriotic duty because they went once every other year, once every 4 years, and voted. In any republic where the true governing body, such as the people, enforce their voice and their will upon those who would serve them, a republic is in fact an easy government to maintain. But any republic whose true governing body, being the people, gives up their right or forfeits their right due to apathy or complacency, will eventually lose those rights. Look around you. I would like anybody out there who knows one right mentioned in our Constitution or the Bill of Rights. Obviously, let's focus on the Bill of Rights, that has not been usurped or infringed upon in one fashion or another. Please send me a message. And I will show you where you're wrong. Politely and with due respect. And appreciation for having listened in the first place.
Diplomatically, so to speak.
So what we've gone over is the elite. This is the hierarchy. These people, as we have discussed, and of course this is a summarizing show, so we're summarizing this. These people don't plan in days, weeks, months, years, generations. They don't. These people plan in centuries. And in some cases, some of these plans may have been going on for as long as a millennia. Believe it. These are the people who, through control of money, have brought down kings and queens, emperors, monarchs, czars. Believe it. Look into the fall of Tsar Nicholas and look at some of the backing. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. We have discussed the sheer fact that it is our complacency that has allowed a lot of this to happen. What we also discussed, and needs to be touched on again, is that a lot of this is perpetrated against our will through our representatives. We need to do something very quickly about this. If we let this pass again, and we send 96% of these idiots back to Congress again that are up for re-election, then by 2016, it might be just a little bit too late. But you've all heard my new motto. It's 2014, time to throw out the trash. I'm not kidding. This is our litmus test. It's time for us to get up to freaking bat. Now, you know I'm starting to rant when I start to stutter. It's time for us to get up to bat and make a point. We've discussed that each and every single right we have has been affected. And again, and I'll probably repeat this before we get off the show, I challenge anybody to send me a right covered in our founding documents that has not been infringed on at this point. This all goes back to fear. It all goes back to total control. Attached, and I want to talk about this now so that everybody's fully aware of this before the end of the show. I don't want to forget it. I don't know, but don't you always feel more comfortable when you're talking to somebody or referring to somebody who believes as you believe and who backs it up almost as fervently, or in some cases even more so than you do, who shows us...
Absolutely, yeah.
I do too. He or she has a passion that really stirs you. And when they talk, the thoughts they're putting forward, it's almost like they're coming out of your head. I don't put myself on this gentleman's level, and I never will. What I am saying is his thoughts. I share so many of them. But I included on the article that Paula has put the link, and the article will be included when it goes up on the Liberty Beacon website, the link to it. Anyway, you just need to see it.
Did I lose you, Roger?
I don't know. I thought I had lost you.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Okay. It's just everything went really quiet.
I know. Oh, my God.
Okay. But anyway, I'm talking about Judge Napolitano. Now, the only reason I put this video in the article is because everything we have discussed over the last 5 weeks, this gentleman talks about in 8 minutes. And as big a splash as I hope some of my words make on you, I just know that the 8 minutes in this video will say it all so much better. He's a very eloquent speaker. He's an extremely intelligent person and very knowledgeable. But this was his last show. This was the judge's farewell call. And this was Freedom Watch. So I want you to do me all a favor when we get done chatting about this, or if you're listening to this for the first time on the Liberty Beacon website, when you're done, go to the link for Judge Napolitano's final show, Freedom Watch, and listen to it. Because I don't ever want you to think that these are one man's radical ideas. If anything, it has been the fact that I have been such an ardent listener of the judges. And during the days when I was waking up, a lot of what he said affected the direction I thought. So does it surprise me that I find myself agreeing with a lot of what comes from his mouth? Listen to the 8 minutes and you'll understand why. You'll remember us having discussed each and every one of those points over the last 6 weeks. Only a little bit more detail. We only had 8 minutes. That I'm sorry to see, Paula, as the judge, his show get canceled.
Yeah, I wasn't really familiar with him, so.
Well, I'll tell you what, he was very big in the Ron Paul movement, very big for Ron Paul, had a very, very large following in the Liberty movement. And he was like Ben Swan, only on the older, scruffier, more wise individual. He just had he struck you as somebody who was really giving you the truth, which is tough on MSNs.
Yeah, true. Absolutely.
Well, I want to get back to the initial, topic today, which is liberty can't exist in shades of gray. And all that we've discussed has been our liberty and how it has been usurped, how it is evaporated. and how it hasn't gone in felt swoops all the way up until, I'd say, the last 4 years, and it has accelerated very quickly. But it was pecked away at. Little pieces here and there. And when liberty, which started as a black and white issue, it existed or it did not exist, suddenly became something that was defined in shades of gray. Suddenly became something that, yeah, it's okay if you do this, but only if you do it this way. Or, yeah, it's okay if you do this, but only if I can do this. Or, yeah, if it's okay, but, and each one of those little pieces, what you have done is given up a piece of your freedom to someone else. Because now there's certain things you can't do without his permission. Or certain things that you can't do without his direction or his oversight. Freedom, believe it or not, is very, very easy to give up. It really is. And the more shades of gray you assigned to what isn't free, the easier you make it to decide what is free in shades of gray. If freedom is defined in black or white, which it always was, all the way up until, I'd say, the beginning of this last generation. When freedom is defined in shades of gray, then freedom doesn't exist. I'd like to know how you can take a portion of someone's freedom away. You can't. Once you've infringed on their freedoms. Okay. So we've gone over the shades of gray issue. We've discussed why liberty is defined in shades of gray can't work. We know that when liberty is defined, or we allow it to be defined in shades of gray, that is when tyranny is permitted to flourish. Have you ever known any authority which is, as we described, intent on centralizing power, where amongst themselves, who will not constantly erode at your freedoms and liberties under the pretext of benevolence to you as the society? Once we allow them to start defining freedom in shades of gray, then freedom is in fact gone. And we have allowed those who aren't supposed to govern us, who we are in fact supposed to be governing, control over our freedoms. The government will tell you today you have the right to freedom of speech, say what you will. But you have the right to freedom of speech as they define it, not as it was originally defined. We have the right to assembly as they define it, not as it was originally designed. We have the right to reasonable expectations of privacy, not as they assign it, but as it was originally, or always supposed to be, ours. This is what happens when you allow liberty to be defined in shades of gray. This is exactly what we've been doing. This is what we've been talking about for the last 6 weeks. It all boils down to something as simple as shades of gray. But you can't explain it any better. The black and white picture is stark. The shades of gray, things can blur so easily. And they have. And we've discussed how. We've discussed the mechanism. We've discussed the elite. We've discussed their servants, our supposed elected representatives. We've discussed the mechanisms of large corporations or financial institutions, which in fact control the ebb and flow of money across this world. We've discussed evil in so many directions, but it all comes down to two things: fear and liberty. And it is the mechanism of fear that is in fact robbing us of our liberties. Our liberties are being defined in shades of gray. The starkness of black and white is gone. And this is something we need to struggle very, very hard against. I do not advocate violence, but with 320 freaking million people in this country, you would think if we got 10 to 15%, you're talking 50 million people. I don't give a crap how bad your message is. If you got 15 million people, you can scream awful freaking loud. If you've got 50 million people, your voice will be heard. We're talking 15% of this country. Not a massive majority. We need to do something that I'm going to constantly be harping on everybody to do all the way up until election time in the year 2014, and that is hold your representatives accountable. Y'all knew I was going to rant on this one. You knew I was. And I probably will every week until election. Paula, you saw this coming, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
You need to be going to their website. You need to be going to your state house website. You need to be going to the congressional website or the Senate website or, yep, I'm about to say this, the Supreme Court website or, yep, the White House website, and looking at how these people you elected, we elected, are in fact representing you. 90% of this country wants GMOs labeled. Believe it, people. There are studies out there. Google it. Some studies say in excess of 90% want at least the freedom or the right to know some level of labeling on GMO products. But yet 71 senators voted against that. And their re-election rate was, guess what? Over 90%. Now, I'm not here to bust anybody's bubble right now about GMOs. We will get to that in this new segment. The point I'm making is when 90% of the population says no, and over 1 million sign a petition asking the president to say no, and the Senate does it in a supermajority anyway, we are not holding our elected representatives accountable. We need to throw the trash out. 2014, time to throw out the trash. You're going to hear me say it over and over again. Find out how these assholes vote. It's not always the big laws that the MSM splashes all across the screen and everybody gets to see because everybody looks like a hero in these. It's the little ones that slip through here and there. The ones nobody ever talks about. The ones that take your freaking rights and flush them down the shitter. Don't just read how they voted in the title of the bill. Read what the bill has to say. A vast majority of these have a synopsis with them. If you find something in the synopsis that you find puzzling, then go to the bill and research it. It is people like us that need to hold them accountable, that need to understand these bills. They're not going to come and pull this clause that's on page 647, subtitle B, clause H, and flag that in front of your face unless you ask them what the hell it is. I'm not saying we all need to be political scholars at this point either. But the fact that you're holding them accountable at all plays on their psyche, and it plays on the game. And the game should be ours to win. There's 320 million of us. There's not even 600 if you put all the big cheeses and the admins and the heads of programs together in Washington, D.C. But there's 320 million of us, and if you don't think we have the capability to hold their freaking feet to the fire, you're wrong. We do. And we can also negate any money they get. And that's another show. We're going to do a lot of discussion on what we need to do in 2014. And I'm talking about real things. I'm not talking about listening to a rant on Awake Radio, even though I love the show. Have you ever heard that show, Paula? The Liberty Beacon Rant? Anyway.
Sounds familiar. If I can find my mic button, I'll be all right. Sounds familiar. And hello to new people in the chat. Thanks for coming and listening to it.
Well, what you got today, anybody that's new in the chat room, was a synopsis of 6 other shows we've done. Or actually 5, I think. This is the 6th. So some of it might sound familiar to you, but a lot of it, again, is relying on information we already put out in the last couple of shows. But it's not hard. If you have done any research on a lot of the topics we're going to discuss, it's not hard to plug yourself into the discussion. It really isn't. It is a discussion that everybody who's truly awake and aware has had at some point in their life with somebody. What we've gone over the last 6 weeks is the mechanism. What we're going to go into starting next week is the form of delivery. Because there is so much wrong on so many levels. And for this reason, for anybody who doesn't know, boy, I switched right into my, anyway, whole different mode there. We are launching a brand new website, and for all of you who think that the Liberty Beacon is the center of the Liberty Beacon project, and I'm talking about the Liberty Beacon website, thelibertybeacon.com, you're absolutely right. It's the center of the Liberty Beacon project. The new site is The Falling Darkness, and it is the edge of the Liberty Beacon project. Now, there's 2 ways to describe the falling darkness. And one way, and again, we would hearken back to the comparison of half empty or half full as far as the glass of water. Okay, the falling darkness can either mean to you that things are getting bad, that one freedom after another is being torn away from you, that medical tyranny is being perpetrated on us from all directions, that we're being poisoned, oh, woe is me, and in a lot of cases you would be right. And that could be your attitude. Or your attitude could be the falling darkness, as in the darkness is falling away through education, through knowledge, through discussion, through sharing. Through hopefully programs like this, we are all learning more every single day. Well, I will tell you, it is the only website that the Liberty Beacon Project will sponsor. And actually, if you look at the header, it is in fact a Liberty Beacon site. It's the only one we're ever going to sponsor that is going to have a dual personality. Because it's going to cover both of those aspects, because they're both true. Never before in the history of mankind has so much evil been perpetrated on mankind in a continuous fashion legally. The assault with GMOs and the amount of information coming forward to prove their toxicity and what they're doing to humanity and the entire biosphere. Vaccinations and their place in the whole situation, and many other issues. These are all topics that border right up there with anything else, because this country is sicker than we have ever been in our history. These are the points of discussion you will find on The Falling Darkness. Now, they're either going to be stories that are going to tell you things are this bad and this is what we need to do to make them better, or we're going to be giving you the facts on something that is really bad. Because there is no solution at this point. That's what our discussions, that's what our rants, that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be exciting your brains, triggering a thought response, getting you to discuss these issues. Believe it or not, with 320 million of us, we can probably come up with a lot better ideas than the 600 or less that's supposed to rule us. So that's what The Falling Darkness is. And I'm glad I got a plug in on that, Paula. But again, we have the center of the project, which is thelibertybeacon.com. So the edge of the project, as I've defined, will be The Falling Darkness. Now, the series has been good. I've actually enjoyed doing it. I feel so relieved after I do one of these shows. It's like blowing off a big old pile of steam.
I bet you don't even snore tonight. Yeah, but you've just been so calm. I was afraid that maybe you weren't feeling well at first.
No, but this was like I said, a culmination of everything we had discussed. I tried basically to leap from one issue per show to another as quickly as possible so as to cover 6 shows in one, and hit hardest the main points. And the main points, again, are you need to dump the fear. You need to do the research, even if it's to go into our archives and type in whatever search parameters you want and come up with something we've said on it. Because I'll guarantee you, if you're still trying to prove that I talk out my ass, it hasn't happened in 6 episodes yet. I don't want to ruin a perfect record. I work very, very hard for each and every person listening to this show to research everything. Anyway, Paula, am I almost out of breath here?
About 2 minutes. Almost
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Well, minus the 15 seconds it took me to say that. Sorry.
So if you take anything away from this, before we start our new direction next week, it is you need to understand that we're in the driver's seat. It's easy enough for us to take control. It really is. And it's the fear mechanism that's making us very bad drivers. So thanks everybody for being here. Thank you so much, Paula, for being here as you are. I know I don't give you much chance to talk.
But I'm also part of the audience too, so remember that. I'm
You need to say more.
I'm just going with the flow because it's just, it's just like I can't say anything against, so I would just be saying, I would unmute the mic and go, exactly. And then I would unmute and absolutely, and then be exactly. And I noticed myself doing that for a while. So,
well, I doubt it very much. But thank you everybody for listening. Starting next week, we will be shifting the tangent a little bit, but it all falls under the same category. It's all about liberty. We're trying very hard to be a beacon to all. So have a good night, and thank you very much. Good night, Paula.